Hey guys, how are you? Welcome to FreightWaves Today. Nothing like live TV with some small production problems here to get things started. Malcolm, good to be in studio. By the way, did we work on matching colors?
Twinsies, for sure.
Right?
It's good to see you.
That may be the first time we've been accused of being twins, although same haircut.
I call myself the Mocha Craig Fuller. That's my claim to fame.
That's great. I take that as a compliment, by the way. Got here, Max in studio with us for FreightWaves Today. Welcome. We have a full lineup. A lot of haters today.
A lot of haters. A lot of haters.
I tried to kill the production because I didn't want to come on live. Julie, who's not in studio, thought it would be funny to have Jason Miller, my forever nemesis, on today, which we're going to talk to him. We have Ken Adamo, another nemesis, and someone who is not a nemesis at all is Fabrizio Alvear.
Perfect.
The ePost Global co-founder and president. And so we're going to hear all about parcel and everything going on with the Postal Service.
Great.
So look, I think a lot is going on. This is a really interesting market, Malcolm, in terms of we're right into July 4th weekend.
Yes,
this is sort of the Super Bowl of freight. If there is a trucking Super Bowl, it's this. This is the playoff weekend.
100%. This is
and then
playoff
next weekend is when the action gets really going.
Couldn't agree more.
And so we're going to watch that and see what's happening. Fuel prices have absolutely collapsed. I mean, we've seen fuel prices in terms of retail fuel prices are down 70 cents a gallon. Wholesale fuel prices, on the other hand, are down $1.40 a gallon. Dead. When we think about fuel prices, obviously, if you're buying wholesale fuel, you bought a lot of gallons in your life. You buy wholesale fuel, that is that shows up first, but then retail is very slow to drop. What is your take on that?
Well, fuel basically has such a big impact on returns for a carrier, and trying to get the right number is really a challenge. You got to move your revenue as much as you can with fuel prices, and fuel is highly volatile.
Yes.
It's hard to predict.
So why does it take so long for fuel prices to drop at retail when you look at the wholesale data and they don't drop? I mean, they drop much faster, sorry.
Well, after dealing in the industry for 55 years, I can tell you, I think the retailers all like to drag the prices down as slow as they can.
Shocking. Shocking that they want to increase their margins.
The consumers have to kind of pull it down.
Yeah.
But they'll push it up real fast when there's
have
any
no
type
problem.
of bad news at all.
I think I've heard the expression on the way up, it's a rocket, on the way down, it's a feather. And it does, some of the counter arguments that some of the feedback you hear is that the reason fuel prices are so slow to drop is because they have bought fuel weeks in advance. But that doesn't seem to be the case. When fuel's going up, they have no problem taking the price up.
Well, they'll take the price up on the next load that they take delivery on.
Yeah.
And if that load is, say, another 10 cents a gallon,
it shows up in prices.
It shows up immediately, but then, they'll actually buy fuel at a cheaper price, at the truck stop level, and prices will come down a whole lot slower than they went up.
So I guess the question for you, as a former, as the founder of Xpress, had a lot of trucks, are higher fuel prices good or bad for large asset carriers?
It really depends on what segment of the industry that you're in. LTLs have a different equation. Small carriers buy fuel differently than a large carrier. Large carriers have an advantage because they buy a lot more efficiently and sometimes do a lot of futures contracts than smaller carriers can. So there's a lot of dynamics there that most people, you really have to think through. Larger carriers will have an advantage in this type of environment.
That's not what I asked. Is higher fuel prices good or bad for large asset carriers?
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's
he
bad.
won't answer the question, ladies and gentlemen. He was trying to dodge the answer. Let's get into headlines here, the Morning Minute.
We kick things off in California, where a walkout by workers with the International Longshore and Warehouse Union marks the first strike in decades against a major sugar producer. The ILWU strike at C&H Sugar in Crockett, led by Warehouse Local 6, is over health care, retiree benefits, sick leave, overtime rules, and union protections as part of a new 3-year contract. The strike by unionized warehouse employees at the massive Bay Area complex began around mid-June, with about 90 to 100 workers involved. The historic plant receives rail service from Union Pacific and generates 25,000 truckloads of sugar per year. American Sugar Refining, parent of C&H, says it offered a 20% wage increase, while workers say the company proposed cutting 5 of 10 annual sick days, ending retiree medical benefits, and changing overtime rules so premium pay would start only after 40 hours in a week. Meanwhile, in Washington, a recent easing of some requirements by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration appears to be a sign that the rollout of MODIS, the agency's new registration portal, continues to have problems. The specific change disclosed this week by FMCSA is that the biennial update requirement that all entities under its jurisdiction update their information on file with the agency every 2 years has been temporarily suspended. The suspension is for entities that have not completed the required biennial update since June 1st. Companies that have passed their due date for the biennial update since June 1st without being able to register should not worry about inactivation resulting from MODIS-related access or system issues, FMCSA said. The full rollout of MODIS began May 14th and had problems almost immediately. FMCSA Administrator Derek Bars earlier this month released a statement that referred to the technical issues as minor, though Pishan Garni, co-director of Scopelitis Transportation Consulting, said some of his clients are running into conflicting information in various government systems that is absolutely resulting in carriers being unnecessarily unable to operate. Finally, the U.S. Postal Service has staved off a 2027 shutdown by deferring payments to employee retirement funds and other accounting maneuvers, but the liquidity crisis will come to a head by early next decade without reforms. Postmaster General David Steiner told a Senate panel on Wednesday that the nation's mail operator is nearly $31 billion in debt, but only has $8.9 billion of unrestricted cash available as it continues to grapple with declining mail volumes, rising costs, and significant capital investment needs. In March, he warned the postal organization could be forced to shut down within 12 months, absent legislative relief. The Postal Service now projects it will run out of cash between 2031 and the second half of 2034 once retiree health benefits premium payments come due and the health benefits fund is depleted. Mail volume has dropped by more than half since its peak in 2000, while the number of addresses requiring service grows by 1 million annually.
You know, Malcolm, the importance of the U.S. Postal Service just couldn't be understated. I mean, it is so important. Running a media business, you know, we print magazines, we print newspapers. There's businesses that rely upon it. There are people that rely upon it.
Yes.
And under the law, is every U.S. address must receive shipments from the U.S. Postal Service, must be served. That is an enormous expense to U.S. Postal Service. Plus, they have to fund the pensions,
Yes.
but they'll be out of cash in 6 years. The question is, what is the U.S. government going to do about it?
I don't know if you can necessarily do anything about it because
Congress has the money. They print money.
They print money, but at what cost? That was a
Well,
point
they
right there.
print. They have no problem printing money. They've never had a problem printing money.
Oh.
I would argue that the U.S. Postal Service is an American, like it's an institution. It's as important as a utility. I mean, a lot of people are like, well, I just get junk mail. But so many things come in. Social Security checks for those that still receive Social Security checks. You receive notices. You receive, I mean, it is vital to so many businesses, and e-commerce with parcel is really important. So it's an important thing. The Postal Service should not be discounted. Benjamin Franklin established the Postal Service in the United States.
Dang great.
Like, this goes back to an American right that everyone should have access to the U.S. Postal Service. It is something that is so integral to our economy. I think it couldn't be understated.
And I think there's also going to be a lot of things are unlocked because of the Postal Service. I mean, given like you have to prove where you live, right?
Yeah,
you can't do
right.
that without what? The
Exactly.
Postal Service.
And we saw that with Facebook when they had the Cambridge Analytica
Yes.
scandals.
Yes.
They send you the thing, you got to verify that you have a physical address. I think it is for a utility and an American right. It drives our economy. I hope the Postal Service gets some love from Congress. Congress just needs to address this issue. It has a lot to do with the pension benefits plan. It's the idea, they lose money when they send mail to places in Alaska. They've got to serve addresses in Guam,
Hawaii
and
as well.
remote parts of Hawaii, and it's very expensive. And they even use things like sled dogs up in Alaska. Pretty insane. I wrote a whole section on the Postal Service, and after I was done in my book, that I published earlier this year. After I was done with sort of reviewing and reading all about the Postal Service, I was really enamored with it. I think it's an amazing American institution. It's something that should be taken care of. It is so integral to our economy.
Can I ask, just candidly, I mean, if we do not have the Postal Service anymore, just from your thought process, how does this work? How would it
I
look?
think we would be remiss. I mean, there is no private sector
Yeah.
company that's going to do the work of the U.S. Postal Service, going to take it on. So it is a, it's just not profitable. And I think that's the problem. But it's just much like much of the benefits that we enjoy as American taxpayers. This should be one that we should benefit from.
I agree.
So let's get into it. We have my best friend, Ken Adamo, here with us. Ken, how are you?
You.
Well, look, we're great. This is an interesting time. As we opened the show, we talked about the fact that this is trucking's Super Bowl is next week. This is one of the most interesting times of the year. This is the playoff week, I think I would describe it.
We are locked in. We are stacking freight, as you've probably noticed from my social media posts this week. We are absolutely on our front foot and stacking this week.
So, Ken, you have taken on a different role than you were before. You were you were at DAT providing analytics, reading the DAT IQ product, their freight and analytics product. You're now back in the action. So you're no longer on the sidelines. You are now back in the action. You're no longer Harbaugh. I know that's you're back at it. What is your sort of thoughts on what it's like to be back in the freight market after being away for a couple of years?
So I joined, as you know, DAT in December of 2019. And then just a few short months later, something very interesting happened to the freight markets. I joined Ease the week before Roadcheck 2026 and before Montgomery. So I have quite a penchant for timing in making these switches. I'll tell you, I'm loving it. I love the pace. I missed the pace of the industry. The hum of an operation is something that you just can't replicate on the software side of the house. I don't think one's necessarily better, but I just miss that. You wake up, you get your kind of early morning work done. It's just absolutely nuts from 8 to 11, 8 to noon, and then things start to die off, and you're reminiscing about how the day went. You're making changes. Talking with shippers, I was my last 6 months at DAT. I was leading the shipper business. It's a much different conversation as a service provider than a SaaS provider, as I'm sure you know, Craig. It's just been a blast. It's aging me a lot faster than the software business was, but I absolutely love it.
Ken, I got to ask, did you take the market when you went to DAT? Actually, I guess you got there in 19. The freight recession was coming on. Then it went to this massive rally. Now, some have accused you on X of like playing grand puppeteer to the market. Clearly, that's not the case.
Or I'm just really bad at it. It could just be that I'm really bad at it. I think, I don't know. I've said this the last time we got together. I do think 2027 will be the banner year. You have to go through that pain to get the gain, and we all know that. I've been doing this for not as long as you guys, but 15-ish years coming up on. So, this is the reset. We're talking to a ton of our shippers about re-rates and forward looking, and they're giving us guidance. We're giving them our insight. But I do think it's going to be a pretty gnarly peak season this year, and that'll lead to what I think will be a kind of mutually beneficial for shippers, carriers, and brokers in 27.
What
the difference will be volume.
Since you've left DAT and you guys had a broad set of customers, install base, perhaps the broadest of any company that's in certainly serving the brokerage business, but also shippers. What is different about what you're seeing right now at working for Ease versus what you may have experienced a couple months ago? I know the market has been developing and was continuing to develop when you were there, but has there been a complete change in your perspective over the last couple of months?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, I think shippers decided the market was for real on Roadcheck week. And if not, it was very quickly after on Memorial Day week when things didn't come back. It was the first real instance where, as much as we could joke around or battle about Fern and all of that, I think we can all agree that after those, and even after peak of 2025, things did ease back a bit. no pun intended, after each of those events. I think for shippers, and this isn't really anecdotal as much as it's like confirmed by conversations with them, it's the first time that they're like, okay, we need to get our house in order because this is a taste of what's to come probably after from Labor Day until the end of the year. So I
Now,
think, go ahead.
no. I was continue.
Yeah, and so I think like that was part of it, and I wrote about this earlier this week. When I was in the industry before, you could price however you wanted, and you never really got any sort of like market level feedback about how other brokers were doing it, especially on the spot market. And that's because like these bots and API pricing didn't really exist back then. I'm telling you, like this week has taught me we can turn our knobs and dials, and I can very quickly ascertain what other larger brokers are doing based on like intra-hour win rate conversions. And I don't know. I think this is impossible to do. I understand that. But I really, really wish in my role at DAT, once a year, I could actually go work a month as a broker. Like some of the things I had been in the business for 7 years before joining DAT, and that was immensely helpful. But some of the things that I thought I understood about the problems they were facing were still pretty abstract compared to like, how do you think about same day pickups in the morning versus in the afternoon?
And
Those
was
are
that
two,
an
like in this
evolution?
environment.
Ken, was that an
Go ahead.
evolution from when you were the market before, or was this just, was that a difference? I know you were at FedEx, you were on the FedEx Custom Critical business, which is their on-demand expedite, which is sort of an extreme level of service versus the traditional truckload brokers. Was your observation about wanting to work in the market related to just the evolution of what's happening since you left, or was it reflected in the fact that brokers have a much more diverse business model and are handling different kinds of freight?
It's both. Like, so Custom Critical handled, I don't remember the exact revenue. It was like a $300 to $400 million truckload brokerage that rolled up under Custom Critical. So like, that's kind of how we evolved our on-demand expedite, everything except air. We evolved through how we thought about brokerage spot pricing. I will tell you that I think the way the market is responding is symptomatic of how brokers and shippers have changed. Like, when I was doing this back pricing brokerage freight and call it like 2017 as example, like that was a year when the market was really, really hot. Shippers didn't really they were just standing up. I'm sure you all remember this, the shipper bid boards, right? So let's say they were onboarding Manhattan, and one of the things that sold them on Manhattan was this cool concept of a private load board that all of your primary carriers and brokers could go in and select freight. But that's still like a passive way to do it. In the new world, if you're an onboarded primary broker with a large shipper, there's this expectation that you're actively participating in their API or spot portal. And that's a way for us as a broker to think about how much spot freight versus primary. Right? We have to accept the primary awards, right? Because we have SLAs and tender acceptance requirements. But then like how much spot do we want to go after, and how much do we want to set our thresholds? And when the market's inflating, spot's a great way to add margin to counteract the compressed margins on primary. And I suspect when things turn, and I'm curious what you think, but probably sometime in late 27, early 28, things will start to crest. It'll be interesting to see how these spot versus primary dynamics play when the market goes deflationary again.
Now, Ken, first off, huge fan of everything you've been able to do so far in your career. I love your background with DAT and FedEx. I guess my question for you is, you're obviously, Ease is describing itself as a service logistics company, but it's not necessarily a tech company, but it is because you're deploying AI at scale and running autonomous vehicles. My question is, how do you kind of square the two, given your background? You're never going to leave tech alone, but also brokerage is in your DNA.
Yeah, I am a critic of AI in like the abstract executive leader who doesn't think it's worth their time to write a personalized email to the company. So everything's littered with M dashes, or like someone who's all of their sales collateral is AI, or they think that like AI bots talking to AI bots is the way of the future. I'm like very pessimistic or bearish on that. Like the approach, what attracted me to Ease was our CEO, Peter, he's out of the office today and probably won't see this, so I don't think his head will grow 3 sizes larger by giving this compliment. He's probably one of the best operators I've ever worked around. It's specific to auto freight. Like, he deeply understands the ins and outs of the operation. And so prior to me getting here, he has essentially handed down to the tech folks the mind of an operator distilled down. So we think of things as, we call it speed, shipments per Ease employee daily. And in our mind, if we can, right now, that number, we want to add more and more and more to that. And so if you think about a tech like Convoy, right, to think about they're helping automate the brokerage through automated brokering and tendering. If we can add an additional 1 to 2 headcount worth of shipments moved through the machine daily, that's headcount we don't have to add. That's more competitive we can get on pricing, and more efficiently we can run the operation. So it's really thoughtful tech. It's automating check calls. It's even like the little things that we all deal with in brokerage, like sorting our dispatch boards by loads that are going to be the hardest to cover, so we grab those first. There's also a really cool side. I'm expedite at heart. FedEx Custom Critical, I loved the expedite. Like, it's not just shipping pandas and, we ship the penguins and all that stuff. It's that on time, super short lead time. And we have that. We have a really cool expedite. It's built around the Midwestern auto market. It's expanded into retail. And that's where you see the foreheads, the autonomous trucks that we've been taking delivery of. Those will be in real practice doing the short haul stuff in and around our warehouse in Marysville, Ohio. And we look to expand that in partnership. So I think that's a long way to say what we're doing, and what attracted me here wasn't kind of a CEO in an expensive suit at a trade show talking about AI. It was like an operator chewing on a pencil, like popping a Zyn, thinking about AI. And I mean that literally.
Ken, I know that, National Logistics Management, you talk about automotive expedite, was sort of the OG marketplace. Never say no, the idea that there's always a price to clear. FedEx Custom Critical participated in it. We had Drew Wilkerson on a couple of weeks ago. XPO bought that business, that NLM business. I think Landstar owned it. Is that still the way automotive works in terms of this idea that there's always a price that the market will clear, ultimately when the market clears? And if there is no option for trucking capacity, they will air freight it. Is it still operating the same way?
Yeah, it's fascinating. So, obviously Custom Critical was big. Back then it was like Panther, Load One. Like, he had these like traditional, and I think like it is just this, what has changed, at least in my opinion, over the last 10 years is you had a little bit more wiggle room on price, but no wiggle room on service. And I think like what's happened over the years is that price pressure has gotten more as more players have gotten into the space. And it's pretty price competitive, at least more than it was in my experience 10 to 15 years ago. But like the demand on service, no one has told these automakers that just in time has sort of like massaged out of the industry a bit post-COVID. The expectations are high. I think the interesting thing, and this was just starting to happen as I left the industry the last time, was a lot of especially the European automakers, started taking advantage of the massive tax advantages to settling in the American Southeast. So you have this almost entirely different, yet modeled off of the Midwest auto industry. So they're not as participatory in some of these. I'm trying to remember what, back in let's say 10 years ago, it was NLM, PTLM, and Active were the 3 big auto boards where you got your freight, you got your scorecards, everything. If you think about like Toyota, Volvo, Nissan, I can go on and on, BMW and Mercedes, they've all set up shop in the Southeast. And in and out of Detroit is something that's like in the blood of these operators. In and out of, Jackson, Mississippi, not so much. So it's just the ever-changing dynamic of how these things work. And then you layer on like the parts network, the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. It's very complicated. And really, honestly, not my forte, if I'm being totally honest.
The South has been a massive beneficiary of reindustrialization, of foreign companies making investments. It's the number one destination for foreign direct investment. We're going to hear a lot about the economy and industrialization and reindustrialization with Dr. Jason Miller here shortly, who's going to be on the show. This is a crazy show, but I want to talk to Max about autonomous trucks for a second. Dad, when we think about autonomous trucks, the large asset carriers have been sort of at the forefront of working with the OEMs and companies like Waymo to develop autonomous trucks. But what we're hearing from Ken is that brokers are playing a role in this as well. Some folks that are not traditional asset folks. Do you think that we're going to see a world where the non-asset players start to blend in and the asset players start to blend in, where they're operating a very similar business model when we get to the world of driverless trucks?
Well, I actually think that you're actually going to see shippers own a lot of autonomous trucks too. So it's going to be a blend of the carriers, of the brokers, and also the shippers. Shippers probably will be the primary beneficiary, where they can operate trucks, at will. And I think that's going to change the equation for the whole industry relatively fast.
So 24-hour clock, I mean, or 20, I don't know that you can run it for 24 hours and you have to maintenance and stuff.
Sure.
At some point you have to recharge or refuel the truck. I do have a question for you, because this has come up in, we'll call it a heated debate on X. Do you have to have electrification to have autonomous, or can you have autonomous without electrification? And do you view a world where we will have diesel-powered autonomous trucks?
Well, I think you've got most of the trucks that they're doing today are diesel powered, but I really think you're going to see a transition to electric and then eventually into hydrogen. And I think hydrogen is going to be the ultimate fuel source long term, but we're not there yet.
Can the autonomous vehicles that you guys have implemented, are they electric, and are they for short range vehicles, or are they actually using some alternative, or using a fuel source, a fossil fuel source?
And they're the equivalent of, like, I think a 28 or a 22-foot box truck, right? So they're doing. I'm not entirely sure about all of the ins and outs of it, but it's going to be centered within, I think, 100 miles of our Marysville warehouse facility. So you can imagine, like, a lot of picks and drops for the shippers that are within in that general vicinity, and they'll be remote piloted, and then they'll have a backup pilot operator down in Texas, but it'll be someone in Marysville that's piloting it. I really don't suspect that we'll be expanding too much into long haul over the road over the next couple of years, but I think there's like a third party. I agree completely with what Max said of shippers, carriers, and brokers. But what intrigues me the most is this opportunity for third party investment, if you will, where imagine you had an investing class that said, hey, this is a safe, proven technology. To your point, Craig, let's say it's running at 90% utilization on a 24-hour clock, and it's throwing off cash. Can you create an investment vehicle, kind of pun not intended, around these autonomous trucks where the capital to invest in the equipment is provided and then licensed through some actual motor carrier operating facility? I think that's an interesting frontier discussion that's starting to happen amongst the OEMs.
Yeah, one thing that we were talking about, the autonomous trucks and what type of fuel. If you look at diesel, a lot of those diesel trucks have like a 1,200 mile cruise range before they have to refuel. Electric is probably down in just a few hundred miles. And if you're trying to do a 20 to 24 hour duty cycle, the diesel is going to be about your only solution, at least at this point in time.
Now, what about natural gas? I mean, natural gas vehicles have been teased. Why aren't they more ubiquitous?
Well, they've tried it several times, and a lot of the technology just didn't get there. I think Cummins came out with a natural gas engine. Part of the problem was the cylinders weren't being lubricated properly, so they pulled the product back off the market. And I think they've got to come up with new technology to really make the natural gas work. So there's still a combination of different types of fuel, but I think diesel today is still by far the best. Electric for short range, and especially for smaller vehicles, may make a lot of sense though.
Yeah, I mean, decarbonization, if you really wanted to take out the most the most effective way to decarbonate the air is actually natural gas. Converting diesel into natural gas will do more than is the more practical solution to actually decarbonize the air. But we're a long way from that.
They've got to get the technology there.
Yeah, so interesting. We'll be right back. We have a heck of a lineup today. We have Dr. Jason Miller. Ken, you're welcome to stay. If you want to stick around and just argue with our panelists, feel free. I would welcome that. We also have you're not a doctor, Matt Leffler. He is an attorney. I don't know, this Venn diagram of PhD, DAT, former DAT people, lawyers, PhD, big mega fleet. There's a lot of people to hate on this, journalists. We'll be right back.
It's National Safety Month, which makes this a great time to ask how your fleet can prevent more accidents. Samsara AI detects risks in real time, giving teams more visibility into what's happening on the road and more context to coach drivers before risky moments become incidents. Fleets using Samsara Complete AI Safety Solution have reduced crash rates by nearly 75%. See the data behind the results in the Samsara Safety Report at samsara.com/freightwaves.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara Driving Coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on Masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited and I hope to see you in class.
Imagine a world where your freight moves as fast as a digital pulse. What if your visibility didn't just tell you where a truck was, but exactly where it needed to be 48 hours from now? Think of a logistics network that corrects its own mistakes before they cost you a single dime. What if your supply chain could think for itself? Imagine AI agents negotiating rates in milliseconds, predictive models that solve labor shortages before they even happen. This isn't science fiction, it's the agenda. On July 15th at the historic Old Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how AI is embedded into every mile, every warehouse, and every handshake. Because in 2026, the future isn't just coming, it's already negotiating. The FreightWaves Supply Chain AI Symposium. Secure your spot now.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. It has been quite the show so far, and we have much more content in store. I'm genuinely excited about it. But before we get to our next date, let's go and talk about this sonar data and update from Craig Fuller.
It is that time of year. We are ready for Trucking Super Bowl, which is July 4th weekend. This is the playoffs the week before July 4th week, headed up to the holiday. So we think of this as the playoffs. This is the time of year when we start to see everything converge. Drivers start to leave the market to go home for July 4th. We see motor carriers really position trucks, try to get drivers closer to home, position them for that weekend. Really, a lot of trucking companies have policies that they will guarantee they will get drivers home 2 times a year, July 4th and Christmas. And this is the time of year where they start to position them. So they're thinking about their networks, they're thinking about their drivers. Frankly, they're thinking about them more so than they're thinking about moving freight, because it's important you retain drivers. If you don't get them home for July 4th, you're probably going to lose them. That's the old rule. And so they try to do everything in their power to get them positioned there while still handling the massive surge of freight that's out there in the market. It's important to know this because this is what's going to drive the market. Tender rejections did peak at a cycle high a couple of weeks ago, really Memorial Day weekend. We saw a surge over the last couple of days. We're at 17.71%. We're as high as 17.8%. I think we will next week get above 18%. And the question is, can we get to 20%? We've been talking about it. It's an important factor. Spot rates have also gone near all-time highs, although they have not broken it. Again, Memorial Day weekend was the last time they broke it. We could see that next week. I would expect to see that as capacity comes out of the market. It's really, really important to watch that because that will set the tone for really what that early July period looks like. When we look at the haul map, which is really market conditions, we're seeing looks largely the same. we're not seeing a lot of changes. Northern California, because of produce, is heating up a little bit. Southern California, because of imports, is doing okay. South Texas around El Paso, Las Cruces, those things are looking pretty good. It's starting to change colors. Western and Eastern Pennsylvania. Western Pennsylvania is a little softer, but really Eastern Pennsylvania is looking pretty good. And then most of the other markets, again, blue to blue, go to the blue markets to get freight, avoid the red markets. That's what the blue to blue map represents. If you go to blue markets, you're better off getting, your chances of finding freight is much better because there's more loads coming out of a market than going in. That's what the blue stands for. The red basically means there's more trucks than there are loads. And so go to the blue markets. I think that's what's frankly most important. One of the things that has really caught my ear this week is the idea of driver availability. I was visiting with some large motor carriers this week, and they told me that finding drivers has never been more difficult. And I think this is a really important factor. These are some of the largest carriers in the market with an enormous amount of resources. They've been through multiple cycles. They know how cycles work, and they prepare for it. But recruiting drivers has never been more difficult. They have far more job openings than they have drivers that are applying for them that they can hire. This is really important because it tells us that the capacity increases that we've been talking about, the concern that the freight market would overcorrect, is very unlikely right now. If you can't find drivers, then you're not going to buy new trucks. And if you don't buy new trucks, you're not going to grow your fleet. And this is pretty consistent among the largest motor carriers. And again, these are fleets that have all of the resources, the money, the compensation plans, all of the resources to really, really benefit to be able to get new drivers in the seats, and they can't get them. And I think that tells us a lot about the capacity conditions, that this market is going to continue to tighten. And so I don't see any catalyst whatsoever to change the trajectory of the freight market. It's not going to get looser as we head into the second half of the year. Industrials have been pumping. We have not seen housing construction, but there's a housing bill that may or may not get signed by Trump. But all eyes are on the driver situation. Imports are starting to flow in after a pause in the first quarter. Really, it's always a soft import market as importers sort of take a break. And really what drives the import market is the retail holiday season. That is starting to come in, and we're starting to see freight pump, and that will continue to carry us through the second half. As retail goods come in through the ports, they will put pressure on the trucking market. But there's no new drivers coming into the market. Now, one thing to keep in mind, this is also going to hurt intermodal capacity, because if you can't get drivers into the road, you still also can't get them for drayage operations. So freight's going to get left on the docks. Freight's not going to move. It's going to be left at the ports. It's going to be really interesting to watch. Everyone's going to have to pay up. Fleets are paying up for drivers. Shippers are having to pay up for capacity to get contracted freight capacity. And brokers are going to pay higher spot rates. It's just the way it's going to be. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, going to change that story. Compliance crackdown is continuing. The states and the federal government are doing their part. Insurance companies are putting more regulations on whom they can underwrite. You've got the issues with MODIS and the FMCSA, where really brokers can't even verify if the driver's legitimate or the carrier is even legitimate. They even have legitimate operating authority. It is a mess out there trying to find capacity. That is opportunity. That is the opportunity we all wanted. We want tightening capacity. We want tighter conditions. Tighter conditions are better for the market in terms of the health of motor carriers and for driver wage increases, and the conditions are there, and that is not going to change anytime soon.
Dr. Miller, welcome to FreightWaves Today. Tell me where I was wrong.
No, I would agree right now. It is a very tight supply side of the market, and certainly the rest of this year, you're unlikely to see any meaningful shift over in terms of additional capacity coming online. Maybe a little bit by Q4 once we start to see some of that new Class 8 order data start to make its way out of the factories. But it's going to be really 2027 is, I think, the first real chance to actually see capacity start coming back in.
Well, we got to record that clip. We're making history. Dr. Miller agreed with me on something in public. This is good news. Jason, how are you, man? It's good to see you.
I'm doing well. Just not looking forward to the heat next week. We're not used to it up here in Michigan, but other than that, can't complain.
You know, Malcolm and I are wearing green. It is not, we were surrounded by Michigan State folks, but yourself, the Sparties, we got Matt Leffler. Let's show Matt Leffler. He's with us. He's been hanging out for some time. So this is, we're full of green here. And, but I've got to really, I want to talk about the economy because you certainly have a pulse on what your perspective is on the economy. I talked about the fact that industrials are doing better than other parts of the economy. What are you seeing right now?
So it really depends on, for different, shipper verticals. If you are supporting the physical ecosystem to, for AI computing, things are very good right now. Construction, steel, a lot of electric generation equipment. That sector is doing really well. Large batteries for storage. So you've got certainly some pockets of strength, but then you have other pockets more supporting consumer demand or tied to single family housing, as you mentioned. Those are doing fairly poorly. So major appliances, wood products, and things of that sort. You're seeing very weak demand right now. And so I think that's what really differentiates sort of this demand side conditions from, let's say, 2017 or 2018, where essentially all sectors that generate a lot of freight were growing. Here we have sectors that may be, contracting a little bit in the case of major appliances, but you have certainly certain shipper verticals, racks for AI servers and whatnot, where you just have demand off the charts at the moment.
Yeah, those companies seem so price agnostic. I mean, inflation's been an issue. But if you're building an AI data center, it's a rounding error, construction cost or a rounding error, or the inflation related to it compared to the amount of capital that you're looking into things like GPUs and the opportunity. At least that's what investors have telling them.
No, exactly. And I was just literally compiling Micron's data since they just had their quarterly release. And it's really stunning when you look, for example, at their overall profitability, their gross margins. In the same quarter last year, it was $3.5 billion. Same quarter this year, it was $35.1 billion. So you're talking a 10 times increase in overall profitability from operations, essentially. That is purely within a pricing power standpoint because their COGS really didn't increase that much. So we know it's not fundamentally more output explaining this. And so that is illustrating that price agnostic nature. But I think looking further out, the concern then is what does this mean for overall inflation when you have companies like Apple that are already announcing significant price increases? Now that Apple's announced, you'll see the other consumer products companies will follow suit because you tend to like to herd bad news after somebody major has already announced bad news. And so I think that then comes into what does the Federal Reserve start doing? Because the one lesson we've seen from end of 2018, early 2019, and then certainly 2022 is the moment the Fed starts raising interest rates, we start seeing CapEx in other sectors, certainly single family housing, starts to fall quite quickly.
Jason, I mean, I was talking to a big, one of the top building materials manufacturers, and they said it isn't as much interest rates driven today as it is just the price and cost of housing is really the big challenge. What is your perspective on that?
So I would agree with that, that right now, overall, the price of new housing is just so expensive. So many people are locked out of the market. So many folks are locked into low mortgages and don't want to give those up. But I think another dynamic is if you look at the job opening and labor turnover survey data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, just focus on, private sector hiring. It is at very low levels. So companies are hiring basically as though it was 2010 or 2011, even though the unemployment rate is sub 4.5%. And so since companies aren't hiring as much, that's also reducing the incentive to move. So I think that's another dynamic as well. And that especially ties to the fact that existing single family home sales are right now basically where they were at the worst of the global financial crisis. And so even within housing, starts have held up much better than what existing single family home sales have held up, because those are down something like 35% from sort of a pre-COVID baseline. and they've been stuck there since really Q2 or Q3 of 2022.
Now, Jason, I have a question for you, and it's a question in regards to carriers. Will there be new capacity to come online? And to you, based off of what you know, what does this timeline look like?
So if you look historically, anytime spot rates go up like they do, you start to see Class 8 orders soar. And that's what we're seeing right now. I mean, Class 8 orders are up over 100% from last year. Again, caveat being that we do have regulatory changes that could be encouraging some pull forward. My belief is there you will start seeing capacity come online, but it always lags substantially. This market effectively started to turn in December. No, we weren't sure about that, though, because that's a Christmas holiday. Things felt like they were actually loosening a touch in January. Then we had a couple severe winter storms into January, early February. And so really it felt we could confidently start saying the market had turned by about March. Those capacity expansion decisions take some time. And so I would expect we'll start to see some of that come online in 2027 and steadily throughout 2027, just given the lag that exists. We saw that back in, the 2017 through 2019 market cycle. The challenge was we had a tremendous amount of capacity that started to come online in the back half of 18 and the first half of 19, even though that market had turned over certainly by January of 19. And freight volumes really had peaked on a seasonally adjusted basis in Q2 or Q3 of 2018.
Now, let's expand on that capacity point because you've mentioned it a little bit, but where does it come from? Is it sideline trucks, new entrants, or is there a variable that I'm not even thinking about right now?
Yeah, so it's a mix. So if we look at where that capacity itself comes from, it typically is disproportionately new entry. In terms of sort of, new entities starting up. We will see younger firms will tend to have higher rates of job creation during sort of these expansive market cycles. So we can look to some of the young carriers. But in terms of tipping the overall scale of the industry, it really comes down to the mega fleets expanding capacity. So we need to see the large players make a decision to say, okay, we need to expand outward. No, my firm belief is that there is a very strong sort of expansion drive that exists within the trucking industry as it exists in other industries. And what that means is that when conditions are good, many business owners will say, look, I want to expand. I want to make more profit. I want to sort of realize the prestige of having a larger carrier. But there's also strains that exist from customers. So imagine you're a medium-sized carrier, you're serving a fabricated metal producer making data center racking. They're seeing demand double and triple, and they're then coming to you and say, look, we want you to haul more freight. Before we were doing 10 loads a week, now we want to bring you up to 18 loads a week. The challenge you have is if you just say, you know what, I don't want to expand and get that, your concern is they will go out and find somebody that will give them that 18 or 20 trucks a week. And so I do think a lot of carriers that are servicing the sectors that are seeing sort of this additional freight demand, there will be pressure to grow because you don't want to lose those existing customer accounts because at the end of the day, those shippers are going to make the decisions that they view as best for them. And if that means winnowing some capacity that just doesn't meet their current needs, they will do that.
Dad, I had dinner with a very large mega fleet this week, one of the principals at one of the large mega fleets, and he described the truck driver market, the recruiting market, as tight as it's ever been, the most difficult market. You have hired, hundreds of thousands of truck drivers throughout your career. You've operated a large fleet. If you were in the market right now, and I was to describe this as the most difficult recruiting market ever, would you be adding trucks?
Of course. When you look at the super cycle that's being developed, looks like it's going to be much longer term with the Trump tax credits for companies to reindustrialize this country. Yes, I think I'd be adding trucks and I'd try to add drivers. One thing that happens in a big fleet, because of cycle time to order maybe 2,000 or 3,000 trucks a year, sometimes you have to put those orders in almost a year in advance in order to get those slots to get trucks built. So sometimes you put orders in, especially when it looks like the order bank is being filled, then you put orders in to protect those order slots. At the same time, maybe you don't have the drivers. So you get the trucks, and then the next thing you do, and sometimes it's an ebb and flow between who's the most important. Is it the customer or is it the driver? And there's periods of time when the driver's more important because you got to get them. So you'll go in, you'll increase wages, you'll increase benefits, you'll do a lot of different things. You'll set up custom fleets for drivers that don't want to run certain parts of the country. You'll do all kinds of creative things in order to get drivers in because you've actually got the new trucks that have been delivered. So you've got to fill those seats.
I mean, the issue though is if you are thinking, if all the other executives across the mega fleets are thinking exactly like you are, then we run the risk, as we always do, of overcorrecting. Jason, that's always the concern. And Ken earlier in the show talked about the fact that he thinks that the peak will be sometime in late 27, 28, where we just sort of get to the climatic moment, the apex of sort of adding too much capacity. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I would agree with that I think this is the challenge. Is the fundamental economics of trucking are no different than in ocean shipping. And this issue of what have been called shipping cycles, where we go through this boom and bust, have been traced back to the 1700s. So this is just a fundamental nature of human behavior. As an economist, how I like to think about it is demand for truck transportation is fairly price inelastic. Yes, you can have some transition over to intermodal, and we're likely seeing that right now, but that's a relatively small number of loads in the big scheme of things. So demand is relatively price inelastic. P&G doesn't care if it's $3.50 a mile or $2.50 a mile. They have to send that shipment on to Walmart. But supply of capacity is incredibly price elastic. If line haul rates go up, you will start to see carriers expand because they chase those additional profits. They decide they want to grow bigger. And so that combination means the moment that demand growth either slows and or the capacity starts to get to that point where it really starts to ramp up, then you end up overshooting. And if you look historically, this is what's happened the last several cycles. 17 and 18, we added too much capacity, took only a little bit of a slowdown of freight demand in 19. We had a bear market. Same thing with 22. We added way too much capacity that year. We had freight demand start to cool in response to the Fed, and we had the market tip over. Where we're dealing with sort of a different beast right now is every other market cycle has always been more demand-driven. We've never been in a supply-driven market cycle. And so I think that makes it more difficult to say how long will this last, because historically most sort of up cycles have lasted, call it 18 to 21 months. The question is then, does this one have more running legs than that? Now, if you take 18 or 21 months, pin it from Q1 of this year, that gives you till basically mid part of next year for when that cycle would be expected to turn.
Well, there is a difference in this market versus past markets, is the immigration story. Just overall new people coming into the United States. We've cut that, that has been constrained, if you will, with just immigration policy, period. So we've got to, and then we have demographic issues of just drivers, drivers that are non-immigrants are retiring out. And then you've got all the sort of crackdowns. One of the comments by another mega fleet executive was that they're losing what they believe is a lot of driver opportunities and driver population to a lot of the fleets that were dependent upon non-domiciled CDLs and drivers that sort of were on the borderline. Maybe they had taken some liberties on whom they would hire, less restrictive. They think they're losing them to significant sort of sign-on bonuses and pay increases that have really hurt their ability to sort of pull from the same pool. And I just got to ask, you study the data, where are these drivers going to come from that are going to relieve the market if we do see demand pick up?
Yeah, so there's been some really good academic research by Jonathan Ferris at Iowa State, Andy Balthrop at University of Tennessee, that has really looked at, sort of this competition, for driving jobs. And what we'll see is as wages go up in trucking relative to other sort of competing occupations, you will drive individuals over, no pun intended, into the trucking space. You'll see folks as well as wages go up. They work in a warehouse, they interact with drivers quite frequently. You'll have some share of those if they start hearing about, there's big pay increases. I could make a lot more doing this job. Maybe I don't want to be, directly supervised every second with my supervisor, basically physically there staring over my shoulder. Folks will hop into the driving profession. They'll go through the training process. And so this takes time, though. And so this is where I'm saying 27 is when we will start to see sort of any increase of capacity happen, but it will happen. There is just, there's just no way that rates this high for now an extended period will not cause carriers to find ways of bringing more individuals into the sector, especially when some other, occupations are not doing that well. We're not seeing large-scale manufacturing employment growth. Single-family housing construction is not doing well. So some of these other potential occupational choices are not seeing the type of growth that we would need to see to, I think, essentially compete away those possibilities.
Yeah, one thing that we found at US Express, one of the biggest competitors to getting drivers was actually people that were drivers going to Uber. They want to be Uber drivers because they could be home, they could dictate when they wanted to work. They made, in some cases, comparable wages, and that ended up being some of the biggest competition that we saw.
Yeah, and it made it harder. I mean, Dr. Miller, I know you have done some studies on the quote-unquote driver shortage. One of the things that you and I agree is there is no perpetual driver shortage. But you've looked at the labor supply on what happens in trucking. You wrote a great white paper studying COVID because it gave us this really interesting lab in terms of just employment, the employment picture. What are the things that typically compete against trucking jobs?
Yeah, so what we found from that study is we looked specifically at what states saw the most rapid rebound in their trucking employment from sort of this big shock that took place in April of 2020. And the story that really jumped out there was it was a demand side story. So states with large container ports saw more growth in employment. States that had more warehousing growth saw more growth in employment. That very much was consistent with sort of this e-commerce boom. Import boom creates a lot of derived demand from freight. Conversely, the energy intensive states, so your New Mexicos, your Wyomings, your West Virginias, they actually have not seen their trucking employment rebound, even in the peak in 22, to where it was before COVID, because fracking never fully rebounded. And so this to me is where kind of that demand side narrative exists. And I think actually one thing that may keep some capacity from coming online is precisely this issue that we're not seeing widespread sort of economy-wide growth of freight demand right now. You have certain pockets doing well, other pockets aren't doing well, but that will keep some carriers hesitant to add capacity because it's a different dynamic. And like I was mentioning, you feel this sort of, growth drive if your customers are coming to you and saying, hey, I've got more freight that, needs to be moved. Right now, it feels more that we've had, capacity being curtailed. The Supreme Court decision is taken some additional marginal capacity out because brokers are no longer comfortable tendering to the same carrier stable they were previously. And so we sort of went through that shock. But I do think it's, sort of interesting when you look, and Craig, you mentioned this with the data, we saw this big tightening around road check week and then right after the Supreme Court decision. But even though, June is typically the month of the most overall freight demand in the country, it's end of quarter loading, it's gearing up for 4th of July, manufacturing's at peak, construction's sort of as busy as it gets. The market hasn't really tightened much beyond where we were at in that May period. And so that to me sort of suggests that we're starting to see a plateauing, at least in the near term, that would then start pointing, if we factor in that we seem to be having an early peak season for imports, that what we're likely going to see is a plateauing, at least for now. And then it'll take till that November, December sort of holiday period where a lot of that is supply coming out of the market to tighten things potentially even more.
Well, Jason, really appreciate you being here. I mean, it's a great point. This June has not been as we had massive momentum in May.
Absolutely.
And I thought, my assumption was that we would see the same in June. We haven't seen it. Could be some softness, right? I think as Jason mentions, the freight economy may not be as robust as what it was. I don't think anybody's addressed the driver situation whatsoever. There's no case to be made that there's new pockets of drivers coming into the market. Continue to hear about it tough. A lot to pay attention to. Jason, really appreciate you coming on. We'll have to have you back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Jason Miller, everybody. Let's move to our next guest. Let's move right into it. We have Fabrizio Alvire. He's the co-founder and president of ePost Global. Fabrizio, earlier in the conversation, there was a report on FreightWaves that the U.S. Postal Service is having financial issues. No shock to anybody. But the idea that the U.S. Postal Service could run out of money sometime in the next 6 years is obviously a major concern. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's been an issue that's been going on for a while with the USPS. That's nothing new, right? They've made a couple different changes to leadership there. So it's definitely been challenging. I think it's hard to compete with the union and with the funds that they have to pay for retirement. So we've heard about this for the last 5 years. So it's no shock to us.
So what are your thoughts? I mean, if Malcolm and I, when we first started the show, started talking about, man, if there was a situation, and I can't imagine it happening, but, crazier things have happened. We've seen government get, completely dysfunctional at times, and we saw the TSA get shut down for weeks at a time. There is a case to be made that Congress could fumble the ball here on funding the U.S. Postal Service, and we could lose access to postal capacity. What happens then?
Yeah, there's always been word of privatization, right, of the USPS, and I think that's something that still has to be on the table because these threats of losing funding are serious threats to our postal administration, right, and delivery. So I know the post office is partnering with a lot of companies now. There's been some announcements of companies like DHL or OSM Worldwide. So I think if they continue partnering with companies on doing the sortation and the first mile of parcels, that's something that help their cost structure, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of reports this year about the fact that they were hiring, over the last couple of years, they've hired brokers to handle freight. And then you had the whole non-domiciled CDL thing, Malcolm, where some of their line haul network were running with drivers who would never be able to work at the U.S. Postal Service as route drivers.
Sure.
It's been sort of a way, they have so many challenges as a government agency of dealing with the pressures and politics that go into it. It just seems like a lot to navigate.
And with the regulations over top of it too, it's a different ballgame that a lot of people don't talk about.
It is a tough being a government agency that's unloved because you're not going to, the great thing about the Defense Department is they are always getting, there's no doubt that the Defense Department is going to get funded with bigger and bigger incentives. Because we learned after Vietnam that we can't hate on our troops. It's just not happening. But I want to talk about global freight. We've been talking about the fact that imports have started to show up this year. You see a lot of international movement. What is the state of freight internationally right now?
Well, there's a lot of volatility, right? And the new norm is preparedness, right? There's a lot of changes going on with tariffs, customs clearance, also with fuel, right? Like recently the fuel charges by airlines and others. So it's something that's really affecting the industry, right? Recently announced in July, the EU is going to announce a €3 per parcel duty and tax, right? Tariff. So from €150 that it used to be, anything up to 150 was free into the EU. Now they're going to charge €3 per line item, right? So if there's 2 SKUs in a package, that's €6. And I think what the Europeans are doing and a lot of other countries are following suit to what the US government did a year ago, right? When they eliminated the $800 de minimis in the United States. So when they eliminated that, there was a huge revenue stream of duties and taxes for the US government. A lot of people were weary of that a year ago, but now countries are seeing that the U.S. was able to implement it. They did it, and now they're going to follow suit. So, for example, right, if there's 10 million parcels, B2C parcels a day going into a country like Amsterdam, right, in the past, they would charge zero for that. So now if there's 2 SKUs average per package, that's $60 million in revenue for the country in a single day. So it's a huge moneymaker, a huge revenue stream. We're seeing that countries are following suit with the U.S. And this is not going to stop, right? It's going to continue to happen. Countries are going to follow suit. New Zealand also implemented something. And also what countries are doing is they used to be very lax on what was coming into the country, right? Now they want people to register, shippers to register in the EU. They announced a couple of years ago IOSS, which is a import record of who's shipping into the country. They want to know, they have to register within the country. So what countries are doing is they saw a lot of volumes coming in from China, and a lot of it was counterfeit and low value. It was competing with other people. And they said, you know what? We want to know who these shippers are. We want them to register. And now the next step is they're charging, right? They're charging fees for it. And it's becoming a huge revenue stream. And we're seeing it across the world.
I dove into the de minimis as I was writing this book, and it was interesting. At the time that the book was published, de minimis had been basically, that whole exemption had gone away. But it was really interesting. I had a hard time as I was continuing to research the de minimis exemption, really justifying this in my mind, because it was advantaging foreign companies that really don't hire a lot of American citizens to really exploit, particularly when you have TikTok and AI-generated content, to really exploit that role at the detriment to U.S. companies. I mean, I know that you guys are sort of in the forefront, right on the front lines of this. What's your perspective around de minimis being eliminated in the U.S. and now overseas?
I think it was necessary because a lot of the counterfeit stuff that was coming into the country, right, into the U.S., and also drugs and paraphernalia that was coming in. I think it was something that there had to be some constraints on knowing who was shipping into these countries, right, and knowing who those shippers were. And again, fair labor, right? Cell phone cases were coming in. People were buying it for dollars or pennies, or $1 in China, and it was being delivered in 3 weeks into the United States. It's hard for any other country to compete with those types of items that are being processed or made so cheap in foreign countries.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things that I think was pretty remarkable was the idea that TikTok was a Chinese-owned entity owned by the government. They were manipulating the algorithm. There's been case study of the algo being manipulated, and with the introduction of AI, where anyone could write. Basically look like an American legitimate business. I mean, in the old days, you would, if you were going to Amazon or eBay or wherever you're buying it, you would see the Chinglish and know that this is a buyer beware, right?
Oh yeah, exactly.
And you're like, okay, I will go buy this for a couple bucks because I know that it's from China. I don't know that I can rely upon the supplier. I don't know about the quality, but because of the AI and the algorithms, particularly TikTok's algorithm, these companies could compete. And what they were doing what they had done in manufacturing, I'm talking China specifically, was now happening in retail. And that just felt absolutely wrong from where I was, not even to mention the counterfeit or the drug issues, the fentanyl, et cetera. It was more of this just doesn't feel right. And we saw, US, some of the discounters, Five Below, a lot of these discounters, even Dollar General.
I was going to say Dollar General as well.
Typically, in an inflationary market, they benefit because of the sort of marginal consumers buying their goods. It just wasn't that way.
No, not at all.
So it's interesting. Yeah. What is your thoughts in the second half? Where are we at in terms of activity? Are you expecting a bullish second half?
Yeah, we had a record peak season last year. We feel like this year is going to be a record as well. We're scaling up, getting larger facilities, more equipment. Currently, we're doing about 2 million B2C parcels a month internationally. Definitely Europe is a big market for us. So we're really waiting to see what happens here with this new €3 charge per parcel. We've been educating our customers here for the last 2 to 3 months that this was coming. But in our industry, we always have to pivot, right? This happened in the UK a couple of years ago when they changed it to de minimis and they had people registered for VAT. A lot of customers here, brands in the U.S. were a little wary because the majority of their volumes U.S. to U.S. But if they want to go internationally, they have to comply by all these changes, right? So I think the brands that are ahead of it, the brands that we work with that know exactly what the rules and regulations are prepared, are the ones that are going to really succeed, right? Another thing is the HS codes, right? There's a lot of rules and regulations under having the proper HS codes from 6-digit to 10-digit. I think that's going to continue to happen. With AI now, there's a lot of tools out there to help really correct the catalogs of the customers or simplify it to have the proper descriptions. It's crazy. Some people, I'll give you some examples, right? Guns N' Roses t-shirts, like that would get stuck in customs because the word gun would be flagged. So with these AI tools, we're able to take that away and convert it, right, to a cotton t-shirt, right? The word ivory, right? Ivory, an ivory tusk or something like that. It's definitely banned in certain countries. So people use it as color. So AI will convert it over to cream color. So we're using a lot of AI tools to help us fix that data. And there's millions of data inputs that need to be corrected as these regulations get stricter, right? So that's something we're working on with our team, and we're helping our brands grow, right? Finding emerging markets. The Middle East has been a huge market for us. So we're doing direct flights into Dubai. Latin America and Mexico is growing. So also finding the regulations, ensuring that our customers' products could ship based on the ingredients is key. So as these markets change and these rules and regulations change, we have to pivot with it. And we're here to pivot with our customers to grow their brands.
Now, Fabrizio, your counterpart, Miss Kelly Martinez, she was on What the Truck with me about a month ago or 6 or 8 weeks ago. She did awesome. And I'm going to ask a question that I asked her because I want your take on it. There's a lot of pressure everywhere, right, when it comes to just different things happening, whether it's tariffs, customs enforcement, labor disruptions, capacity constraints. If you just had to pick one that you're like, Malcolm, this is the one that is really a thorn in the side of a lot of people in the industry based off of what I just said, what would it be and why?
I think data. What we saw last peak season is 3 to 4% of our shipments were held or delayed because of data. Improper data, not having the right descriptions, the HS codes not being correct, and even simple things. What we're telling our customers is this peak season, have a checklist, right? Understand what your team needs to do to make sure that parcel gets delivered, right? From changing your printers regularly during peak season, every 7 days or every 6 days, right? With the amount of parcels you're processing, if that barcode is not readable, it's going to get stuck in a warehouse, in a facility, a processing facility, right? And it's got to be manually processed, right? To label placement, during peak season, everybody uses a whole lot of temps, right? And if temps aren't placing those labels on the correct part of the box or placing it on a crease where the label, the barcode now can't be read, that's an unhappy customer that's not going to get their parcel. So simple things could help customers get their parcels delivered, right? But really what people need to do is work with their fulfillment facility and come up with a checklist and say, guys, these are things we need to do, from data to quality preparedness of those parcels, to making sure that we're sending products that are acceptable in those countries. The other thing that every carrier is pushing for right now is phone numbers, right? And a lot of people out there still don't want to put their phone numbers out there. But you know what? Everything is going to text messages now saying, hey, your package is going to be delivered between 12 and 2. Are you going to be home? And if there's no phone number, those packages are sitting at a hold center somewhere and people don't even know about it. So again, what we call shadow loss, right, is those consumers that are shipping things and they lose customers and they don't even know they lose it, right? Just because their label was wrong or they didn't have the proper HS code, right? These are things that could be simply fixed by just having proper procedures or a checklist, right?
Right. No, I completely get that. I want to talk and follow up with this one as well. Is there anything from EPOS Global's perspective that you and the rest of your team are thinking that people are underestimating right now that we really need to take heed of?
Well, the world's getting flatter, right? So I think even with these tariff changes, there's a lot of opportunity, right? Like some of our customers, we work with them to open up emerging markets, like Mexico or Latin America, other countries in Latin America, Middle East, right? And there's so much opportunity. And the other thing, opportunities out there are returns, right? With these tariffs going up, you're paying more and more duties and taxes going into the country. Well, have a good partner that can get you your duties and taxes for the undeliverables, right? Even if you don't want them back. If you paid $15 to get it into the country, there's a duty drawback that you could get for that return, right? And the big brands are doing it, but the smaller brands, they don't see it. But it could bring hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars to revenue back into a company if you do it correctly.
So I've got to ask about the World Cup because you run a global company. You're all over the world. You guys are interacting with customers that are trying to manage logistics all over the world. This event has been obviously a chance to showcase the United States. Is this helping the image of the U.S.? There's been a ton of noise out there over the last couple of years, these trade policy decisions, the tariffs, sort of the military interventions. Feels like there's been a lot of negativity, but the World Cup is a chance to sort of demonstrate America's finest.
We have partners all over the world. We have 100 final mile carriers all over the world that we talk to regularly. And yeah, I think we got a black eye the last couple of years on our relationships, the U.S. and other countries, specifically Canada, right? Canada to the U.S. Tourism went down big time. So I think talking to my vendors, definitely it brings us together, right? The World Cup has brought everybody together. The U.S. hosting it, especially here in Los Angeles, where I'm based. There's a lot to talk about. And a lot more to talk about and less politics and more how can we grow together as humans, right?
What I love about it is a Chattanooga, Tennessee resident is that, the Spanish team is just right down the street, by the way, is that Buc-ee's, Waffle House, Cracker Barrel, Americana, American culture, American small town is being exhibited on a global stage. Very different than, and no disrespect to New York City, it's an amazing city, or LA, amazing city as well. There's nothing wrong with that.
These metros, yeah.
As someone who lives in the heartland of America, I always get a little bit frustrated when people, that's the picture that everyone has of America, is these, 2 or 3 cities. Las Vegas maybe is another one, maybe Miami, but there's so much more about America that has nothing to do with what happens in Manhattan.
Could not agree more with you. Could not agree more.
And I think it's a great way to sort of demonstrate just how great America as a place is. And frankly, one of the great, this Freddie, I think you've seen this on X. Freddie's a celebrity now.
Best follow on X right now.
He's a great follow. It's fun how he has been able to sort of bring out the best of Americana. Yes. And he's not talking about New York City. He's not talking about LA, and I don't mean just LA, but those are not the heartland of America.
Oh, he's talking about a brisket sandwich at Buc-ee's.
Which is amazing. Those brisket tacos in the morning are absolutely
fire.
That's a great name for it. So, well, look, we're very excited to have you back. We'd love to get an update as we head into the fourth quarter. Real quick, what is your take on, are we going to have a bang-up retail season, or is it going to be soft?
Last year was strong. We thought it was going to be soft, and peak season started way before Thanksgiving last year. So, we're banking on a bang-up peak season, right? We just invested in some millions of dollars in parcel equipment and a new 100,000 square foot facility in Chicago. So we're ready to roll. Our team's ready to roll, and our customers are just giving us good vibes of that the good things are going to happen. So, right now, summertime is usually the slowest, and we're having one of the busiest summers that we've ever had. So in the beginning here, so we're bullish.
Well, Fabrizio, we'll have to have you back. I'm sorry we have to go. I think we had a jam-packed day today. It's amazing. We got a special guest that just shows up. He doesn't tell us when he's coming. He shows up, he puts on a jacket, and he's coming here to talk about anything that a fleet operator was there. By the way, people prefer him as the fuller over me. Just want to say, he's far more popular among our audience than I am. That's okay.
It's all right.
He's earned the right to do it. He's got diesel in his blood. That's the reason I have diesel in my blood. We'll be right back with these messages. We're going to stay with us. We're going to have Matt Leffler, the armchair attorney, and we're going to ask him all about autonomous trucks because he's got opinions. You want to hear them. Stay with us.
You ever see yourself short on trailers right when demand picks up? Our friends at Premier Trailer Leasing can help you stay ready. With more than 70,000 trailers and over 40,000, again, trailers with 40 locations nationwide, Premier gives businesses flexible access to dry vans, reefers, flatbeds, and chassis when plans change. They're known for transparent pricing, quality equipment, and 24/7 in-house road care support. So you can get more than just trailers. You can get a partner that helps with your operation and keeping it moving. Visit them right now at premiertrailerleasing.com to get set up before your next big search.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on Masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited and I hope to see you in class.
Imagine a world where your freight moves as fast as a digital pulse. What if your visibility didn't just tell you where a truck was, but exactly where it needed to be 48 hours from now? Think of a logistics network that corrects its own mistakes before they cost you a single dime. What if your supply chain could think for itself? Imagine AI agents negotiating rates in milliseconds, predictive models that solve labor shortages before they even happen. This isn't science fiction, it's the agenda. On July 15th at the historic Old Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how AI is embedded into every mile, every warehouse, and every handshake. Because in 2026, the future isn't just coming, it's already negotiating. The FreightWaves Supply Chain AI Symposium. Secure your spot now.
Matt Leffler here for Freight Expectations. Craig Fuller. Matt, I am super tired. I was out in Las Vegas this week. I am slammed. Like, I am absolutely wiped out. I was at the Samsara conference, their user event. I'm wiped.
Well, we are in a truly historic moment. It's not the memorandum of understanding between Iran and the United States. No, something far greater has happened today, and that is that Jason Miller of Michigan State Eli Broad College of Business and Craig Fuller have both agreed that there is, in fact, a qualified driver shortage. The ATA, its heart has grown 3 sizes bigger today, Craig. It is.
I have not agreed that there's
remarkable.
a driver shortage. I want to be clear. There is okay, let's just be clear. You can have episodic driver shortages. Clearly you can, right? But you can have that. It's the idea that you have a perpetual driver shortage. Dad, did you ever truly believe in the driver shortage? I know you did. Don't lie. I grew up and you tried to indoctrinate me and you did a good job of that. But you believed in a driver shortage.
Well, my opinion is, it depends on how you define the driver shortage. I always looked at freight, and there's always enough drivers to move the freight, except for maybe a period during COVID. But I really think that individual companies had shortages, but not necessarily the industry as a whole.
You can can't find drivers to fill those seats. And the industry can have capacity shortages, but as we're hearing this week, it's just hard to hire drivers. But I want to talk autonomous trucks. We've got someone who's bought over 100,000 trucks with us, who has sort of been on the bleeding edge of technology periodically. Matt, you're also someone who's been studying autonomous trucks and driverless trucks. This is a very polarizing conversation, by the way. There's a lot of drivers with a lot of opinion and a lot of people that frankly have opinion. Earlier today, we heard from Ken Adamo, who is at Ease Logistics, about their introduction of driverless trucks into their fleet. What are your thoughts on the story on driverless trucks?
Yeah, well, I'll start with what Ken Adamo said. So he talked about what we look at as level 4 automation. So a remote operator of a commercial vehicle. This is the kind of the first stage of automation for trucking companies. Not the level 3 with collision avoidance systems. Level 4, there is no human being in that cab. That is being operated remotely by somebody else. What we see happening right now is this great transformation. This moment in time is just as important as containerization was in the 60s and 70s. What we saw with deregulation in the 80s and 90s. Now we enter what is really the age of automation. And it's these edge cases where we see the real challenges kind of taking fold. I wrote an article for FreightWaves I think it was last week, about a safety regulation being waived for 5 years for autonomous track inspection on the intermodal side. And Secretary Duffy commented on this thing saying, hey, look, this is what we want for safer roads, safer railways, is having the ability to leverage technology and deploy human capital to fix those things. And now we have the same story being told for autonomous vehicles. We had this waiver of a safety regulation around the putting cones out when a truck breaks down. Now it's looking at a beacon that would be the waiver of this placard thing for the next 5 years. Looking at what Secretary Duffy has done previously, I suspect we will absolutely have this waiver of the cones, and then you'll have this beacon technology. Autonomous trucks are here. They are not going anywhere, and there's nothing you can really do to stop them. What will happen for all of us is to participate in our democracy. And when you see new regulations or waivers being promulgated, it's your obligation to comment on them. But reality is that this industry is about safety and speed and reducing cost. And nothing can do that even remotely as well as autonomous vehicles. So I'm actually agree with Max 100%. Autonomous trucks happen first. Other powertrains, sure, they'll come along, but you can automate the trucks today. And we are looking at the regulations that will ultimately be the thing that binds these things from growing rapidly or accelerates them across the country.
So the regulation story is both involving a federal regulation, which is being worked through. Then you got the state regulations and municipal regulations. We've seen in certain states, I think California had a bill, I don't know if it got passed or not, where they were trying to outlaw autonomous trucks. And I think there's been some municipalities that have sort of pushed this along. Matt, from a legal standpoint, what is it going to take for a fleet, and I want to hear from Max in a second, what's it going to take for a fleet to feel comfortable to make those investments in the technology? What do they need to see on the legal side?
Yeah, so for fleets today, you can experiment on off-highway equipment. So that's what we're seeing right now. You're talking about a yard truck, a terminal truck, a hostler, a shunter, whatever you want to call it. These are technologies and assets that are off of the highway, not regulated by the DOT. So you're able to experiment with autonomous vehicles right now. If you're talking about what you're looking to do with over-the-road trucking, intrastate, so Texas is a great example. There's a ton of autonomous trucks running in the Permian Basin, but also between Houston and DFW. They're running these trucks every single day. What we do see happening is the ability to move autonomous trucks across state lines. That really does require some activity by the federal government. But what the feds are going to do, and this is very clear in legislation we've seen proposed, is they're going to come in and take supremacy of the issue. So local, state regulations that conflict with a federal standard will get stomped. That is what the federal government has the power to do. So my feeling over the next few years, maybe even sooner, is even though states will come up with different regulations, like Illinois, for example, is talking about banning autonomous vehicles. California's talked about it multiple times. Every time they've tried it, they've been defeated. Newsom has vetoed those bills. So we know that autonomous is coming, and the feds are likely to act sooner than later. And by the point that they act, there is no way to stop it. It is going to be like a floodgate that opens up and reduces costs and presumably has safer assets on the road.
All right, Matt, I got to ask this because you're the attorney, I'm not. The idea that a federal preemption can preempt local municipality, so let's say a local road, is that something, because we've seen these ordinances, there are cities that have ordinances where trucks can't drive at certain hours. Where does the federal preemption start and stop? Is there a place where local municipalities can prevent over-the-road trucks that are autonomous from driving their highways? Or is this a point where it's federal preemption, there's nothing they can do about it?
I mean, I'm going to give you the lawyer answer, Craig. It depends. It depends. The answer is always, and Max knows this. He's talked to tons of attorneys. That's our answer.
He's unfortunately funded tons of attorneys, both directly and indirectly. That's the state of being a trucking executive. But let's hear it from you.
Yeah, but I'd say it like this. If a municipality has a regulation on weight for a road, that regulation will apply equally to trucks with drivers in them and trucks that are autonomous. That is absolutely going to be the case. But if you say we're not going to allow any autonomous vehicles on this particular roadway, chances are likely you will have some sort of litigation. Now, maybe the state would side with their local constituents and say we're going to force this anyway, and that might go to the federal courts to be adjudicated eventually. This is going to be a lot of testing. So even before we get to autonomous vehicles like rapidly deployed across this country, there are really big questions that haven't been answered. For example, with Ken Adamo talking about the level 4 autonomous vehicles they run. What level of training must a level 4 driver have? Like if you're going to operate a remote vehicle, should you have a CDL? Should you be subject to drug and alcohol testing? How many trucks can you operate simultaneously? Is it 1? Is it 10? Is it 100? We don't know these answers, but they will be something that we will likely have the ability to influence. So when the FMCSA eventually gets to a place where they start talking about putting out these rules, then you're going to see a lot of people start commenting. But my feeling is when the feds decide to maybe put in legislation that says we're going to take complete preemption, there's not much that states can do to stop it. Now, they can try, obviously, but if it goes to court, feds typically win. They're pretty good at winning.
No, there's a beautiful new federal courthouse coming to Chattanooga. Maybe they'll come here. I mean, this seems like a place. By the way, I don't know, have you seen the drawings of the new courthouse?
I haven't seen it, but I'm an owner of the old courthouse, so I have to see it change.
Well, maybe. It's funny, he bought the bankruptcy court building years ago in bankruptcy. If the irony of that still is interesting to me. But they're building a brand new federal courthouse, and it's under the new federal guidelines for making things beautiful. That doesn't always work out, as we've learned in Washington, D.C. with the reflecting pool. Hasn't been as the scandal that is. Probably going to get a lot of fiery comments on that. But I think it's a beautiful, Greco Deco is what they're calling it. It's a beautiful building. And it's just going to be right next door to us, which is kind of cool.
Maybe I'll get admitted there.
You're getting admitted to the
Maybe I'll try to get, I'll pass the Tennessee bar and go hang out for a bit.
You should do that. But in federal court, you have to be a state licensed attorney to actually operate. Is that part of the rules?
Yeah, so you got to have the state license in the state you're going to be practicing, and then you can get the federal circuits and appellate and district courts like by motion typically. It'll happen. We'll see.
This is great. You should move down and to Chattanooga. You can be in studio.
That's right.
You could have participated in the conversations today if you were in studio. It would have been.
You got some great people. I would just distract.
I got a lot of haters. I definitely have my haters today. Also got people that love me. Those are my father, I think. Let's talk a little bit about, let's bring Max into the conversation. So Dad, you've bought a lot of trucks. Autonomous has been top of mind. for something that's been teased at least for, I don't know, 2 decades, I think. They've been talking about driverless trucks. It felt inevitable. It does still feel inevitable. What is it going to take from your perspective before we start seeing point-to-point autonomous on the roads? Is it a legal framework that you need to contend with, or is it a technology limitation? Where are we
It's
at?
going to be a combination of things. The legal framework is going to be very important. Getting the federal government basically to allow trucks from, to cross state lines is going to be extremely important. In fact, there's a precedent on how the federal government has dealt with those local entities, and that's when they did the 53-foot length laws. The local entities could say this road or this area is not allowed for trucks. But then the federal highways, the state highways, they basically kept those open. So I think there's already a framework that they can pursue to get there. But I really think autonomous trucks are coming on very strong. I think over the next 10 years, you're going to see a major deployment. I also think the driver shortage, with the demographics.
Please stop with the driver shortage.
We got the solution.
Come on,
we got the
way
solution.
too many ATA meetings. That's the problem. He is being indoctrinated in this nonsense.
No, actually,
driver shortage. Are you kidding me, Matt?
Actually, the demographics in this country are changing so fast that we won't have enough workers across the board to do all the jobs that we need to do, especially with the reindustrialization of this nation. And I really think autonomous trucks is going to be part of the solution for the freight industry. And we need it. We need it. We'll need it probably in the worst way by the time they actually get deployed.
All right, send your hate messages, drivers that have an opinion on the driver shortage, to Max Fuller, not Craig. I didn't say it.
Well, but
there is no perpetual driver shortage.
Keep in mind, they won't replace all the drivers, and I think that's
why is that? Let's talk about why you think that driverless
there's
trucks.
Still a lot of things that drivers do. There's a lot of areas that maybe these trucks won't be allowed to go into. So I think there's going to be a good place for drivers. So, some of the jobs will change. That long haul driver probably will be more of a regional or short haul driver.
Now, Matt just said that they can't block them. Federal preemption, Matt. Max is saying drivers are going to be not allowed to go in places, but you just said this isn't going to be a case.
I think you have to look at the functions that the transportation company is doing for that customer. And there'll be a requirement for certain drivers.
So customers are going to demand it. Shippers are going to demand it.
Shippers will demand it. But I also think shippers will be early adopters of the autonomous trucks too.
I want to get into that. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'd say that's a 100% agree. So things like food service delivery, like a US Foods and Cisco's, like that's not going to be done by a robot. That's just not going to be done by a robot. LTL, Old Dominion, Pitt, Ohio, Estes, that's difficult work. Lift gates up and down with the doors, probably not a great use case for autonomous vehicles. But those same companies at their yards, when they're moving boxes back and forth from the warehouse to the yard, great application for autonomous vehicles. Or over the road full truckload. Again, great application for a full truckload. And from a guy who loves maintenance, which is what I happen to be, you can't have 20% of autonomous vehicles being unsafe. That is what you have with diesels on the road now. So there's certainly a value in this technology being more broadly adopted over time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as you have said repeatedly that I think it's 22% of trucks are
22%.
Not roadworthy on the highways. As we start to get driverless deployment and start to pick up data, and there becomes a very clear case that driverless trucks, autonomous trucks, are safer on a per mile basis, when does the public sentiment shift pro these technologies, and when does it make it more dangerous as a plaintiff's, if you were a plaintiff's attorney, to argue that this is an inevitability, that basically that a fleet that isn't using the technology is actually making a mistake, a legal mistake?
Yeah, I mean, this is the question of data. So as time goes on, if you can demonstrate that these technologies are in fact safer, you're going to be in a position where you are not exercising reasonable care when it comes to building out your fleet and speccing your equipment. I would say this, it's still a long way off becoming ubiquitous, obviously, but the pathway is 100% clear. The trends and forces shaping the supply chain don't require you to consent to be a part of them. They are happening regardless. The beacon waiver is a great example. That particular rulemaking, that waiver of that rule had under 350 comments. The rail version that had no one having a robot inspect tracks had less than a dozen comments. So these things are happening without the participation of the broader industry. And as technology gets deployed and that you demonstrate that these things are able to safely deliver freight on time and undamaged, you simply couldn't compete with having human drivers versus a robot. There's no need to spec an AC machine or have it maintained as an AC machine when you have a truck that doesn't require a human being. So the whole story of our industry is shifting in a profound way. And my own father started in the industry in 1976 with roadway. Like, the times of deregulation before those days, that'll be like what we're experiencing right now, pre-automation. There's just no way to actually fully understand how impactful this will ultimately be, but it is a fascinating time to be alive.
Well, my son, Max, who's in college, and I'm trying to direct them into supply chain, maybe covering this story 30 years from now as an AI bot. His AI bot version of him, his avatar, will be covering it because he won't have a job. We'll all be out of jobs. I actually wanted to get Dr. Miller on that as well. The anxiety for young people today with everything happening just has to be pretty extreme. But if we do get to a place in the next, say, 5 years where we have autonomous, what does the adoption cycle look like? There are pilots taking place right now. Dad, what is in terms of, as a fleet, in terms of you guys looking at technology, you're not going to just all of a sudden replace your entire fleet. Is this going to take steps and starts before you do it? Or what does that look like from a timeline?
Well, you actually have to look at the benefits that you get. The more benefits, the reduction in cost will probably drive it a lot faster. If there's a lot of complications along the way, then it's going to go a lot slower. I can go back and look at deployment of satellite communications. At US Xpress, we're one of the first three in the industry to be an adopter. Well, we were actually 10 years ahead of most of our competitors in adopting that technology. And it really took almost 20 years before it became kind of across the whole industry. I really think that autonomous trucks, because of some of the startup issues and kind of rethinking how you do business, it's probably going to follow that same trend.
I don't know that it would take that long, frankly, Matt, because, maybe it does. Maybe this is physical hardware, but AI, if you look at the adoption curves in technology, AI being the most sort of recent example of that, the percentage of people that have adopted it, just the time for adoption is so much less than it was. I think we're, between the OpenAI moment, I think we're three, Nick, is it 3 to 4 years? When did OpenAI come out? 2020. So we're talking, 3 to 4 years, and I think something like 40% of the U.S. adult population is using it once a week. This is a pretty remarkable adoption. If you've got legal, trucks are safer, that is an incentive alone. Mm-hmm. Maybe a requirement, you have a fiduciary requirement, as you argue, Matt, to actually have the technology. You've got the cost elements advantages there. Do you think it's going to be a pretty, once we start seeing fleets adopt the technology, we're not there at all right now. Do we think the adoption curve, the J curve, is going to take very long?
This is why we talked about this at F3 last year, Craig, because I am 100% with you. The thing that stops alternative fuel for big asset-based carriers tends to be what's the residual value of my truck? If I buy a bunch of electric vehicles, what's the residual going to be when I'm done with it? And no one knows the answer. It's hard to say. But with an autonomous vehicle, these are trucks that are perfectly fine for a human being to operate. They're just upfitted with a bunch of sensors and technologies. It's a subscription. You have all these other technology pieces to it, but it's still a fundamental internal combustion engine diesel truck that can be taken off and put out for some other use. So if you have the regulatory framework, which is what I believe is the only real barrier at this moment, if you have the regulatory framework that puts this thing as available, what now has become something that was potential becomes inevitable. And once it becomes inevitable, you're going to see your competitors do something very similar. So whether it's shippers directly leasing this equipment themselves or working with a third party, we just saw Brett Suma. He was with Loadsmith, and then he was with Wabash. Now he's at Bot Auto. He had the same kind of ideas, being a broker who would have autonomous vehicles available for his customers to use and drop trailers. This is why companies like Premier Trailer Leasing, and I love the team at Premier, why trailers are so vital for this future state of our supply chain, because you cannot have an autonomous vehicle without a connected and well-maintained trailer. That is a condition precedent of all the innovation we see. But I think, to your point, Craig, if this thing gets regulatory framework that kind of gets decided over the next couple of months or maybe years, this is going to be rapid, and there will be no way to stop it. Maybe it's 5% of over-the-road freight, maybe it's 10%, doesn't really matter at this moment, but there will be a portion that will no longer be available for human beings to do competitively, and that is inevitable. So it's an interesting time, like I said.
Yeah, Max, I think the question, and you brought something up, that shippers are going to be one of the adopters of the technology. Does this really hurt the over-the-road trucking companies? Because if I'm Walmart or Amazon and I'm able to go buy the autonomous technology, I mean, Amazon is one of the leaders of the thing about Amazon, you can critique them if you want. I think one of the things that they've proven is they are always willing to push the envelope in technology adoption. Probably one of the most automated companies in America in terms of robotics automation. They've spent billions of dollars on buying robotics companies to automate their warehouse. This feels like the shippers are going to be the first adopters. I mean, do you think that's where it's going to be?
I don't think they'll be the first adopters, but they'll be one of them. I think that the shippers really get a lot of benefits once they understand what they can do with autonomous trucks. At US Express, we looked at our total market and figured out maybe 40% we could do autonomously. And of course, we're a much longer length of haul than most of our competitors. But at the same time, I think if you look at, say Amazon or look at Walmart and the volume that they've got a big percentage of their freight that could go autonomously. And then if you get a truck that you can operate 20 to 24 hours a day, that changes the equation a lot, reduces cost a lot.
Yeah, it is interesting to see, shippers have an incentive. One of the things that has always struck me is that the brokers are and I tell this to a lot of founders, it's the reason, frankly, a lot of the freight tech that's come along has been adopted by brokers. These guys they're the most agile, willing to try new technologies, systems, because effectively they have nothing of substance outside of the humans and the technology that is running their operations. So they're not really tied. The worst adopters or the slowest adopters of technology are fleet executives, because really they're so tied into, where they spend their money is recruiting and retraining drivers and ensuring maintenance. That's where all the focus is. In fact, I would argue that the CTOs of trucking companies are not the most powerful tech executive in the business. These are maintenance officers that tend to be the most powerful technology or CapEx investors. They're the ones where the asset guys are so focused on tech. The question is, Matt, I'd love to get your take on this. Will the asset providers, the large mega fleets, or even the fleets overall, will they end up being the winners in an autonomous world? Or do we see companies like Ease Logistics, which Ken is at, are they going to end up becoming the winners and adopters? Or is it going to be shippers? Like, who ends up winning, who ends up losing here?
I think the ones who know how to maintain the equipment. If you know how to maintain the equipment, you're going to win. So I know a lot of brokers who have gone out and leased trailers, having drop trailer pools for their big shipper clients, and they've grown these really interesting product offerings. But if you don't know how to maintain something, you have no business owning it. And so even with shippers that look at possibly looking at automation, for those guys and gals, if they already run a private fleet, they already have trucks and trailers, maybe that jump is a little bit easier. But many that don't have those assets want nothing to do with it. So the winners will likely be brokers. It will likely be asset-based motor carriers. It'll likely be a whole lot of different people. But the people that will lose out are the ones that do not know how to maintain the assets that they have in their fleet, which is why why we see full service leasing growing so rapidly. So a lot of shippers like, I'm great at making this particular thing. I need trucks and trailers. I'll get them from a Ryder or a Penske or a National Lease. I don't want to do that myself. And the folks that want to do it themselves, as long as they know what they're doing, and just to, again, spoiler, 22% is the national out of service rate. So the vast majority of people probably do not know how to maintain the equipment that they've bought. That's a fact.
But Matt, you said something that I think I want to pull on, because I can make the argument that brokers are typically the first adopters. They're really great. They sort of understand, a lot of the marketing that takes place. They're better, frankly, marketers than most asset-based trucking companies are. They know how to position their business than most asset-based trucking companies are, who tend to really focus on their marketing dollars towards driver recruiting and not really towards shippers. Brokers are far better. I mean, you go look at, and this is not a bias because we have advertisers, but you go look at the advertising dollars spent in trucking, it's the logistics companies that are doing it, or the very largest of the largest, who happen to have, companies like J.B. Hunt, which happen to have multimodal operations. They still think like, hey, we're a solutions provider, versus most asset carriers are so focused on the truck. But the interesting thing about this is, and I think I want to really bring this home, is that one of the reasons that Convoy went under, one of the reasons that it failed, was because it elected to go out and buy or lease a bunch of trailers, thousands of trailers, and it couldn't run them efficiently. It couldn't maintain them efficiently. It couldn't optimize them efficiently. That strikes me, Doug Wagner, the CEO of Echo, has said 99.9% of brokers have no idea how a trucking business operates, could not operate a truck if their life depended on it. I know I'm going to get hate mail over that. I'm also going to get a lot of drivers that agree with that. But that's Doug Wagner's quote. We've got it somewhere on record here because he said it at one of our F3 events. But it strikes me that the asset guys that have maintenance programs, that understand equipment, are going to be so much better off in an autonomous world than the brokers who, that's a totally different world. You make a great point about maintenance.
Yeah, I think Max can attest to this too. When you think about the equipment that you own in your fleet that gets the most service, what do I have to look at and put hands on the most? It's the switch tractor. It is the terminal truck, the shunter, the hostler, whatever you want to call it. That yard dog is running, in some cases, every single hour of every single day, stopping only for fuel and maintenance. When you talk about autonomous trucks, what the value of autonomous trucks is not, I don't have to pay this guy or gal unemployment or workers' compensation. No, the value is productivity. It doesn't stop. It doesn't need a meal period. It doesn't need to have an hour reset. And so if these things are running more productively, and that is the promise of the technology, it means you have to maintain it more. You have to touch it more often. And when you think about what is a safe truck, that begins with a human being, a driver, doing a pre-trip inspection, like the inspection of the vehicle, and a post-trip inspection. Now, some drivers don't do that now, okay, but you are legally required to do that. And with an autonomous truck, you have to do that still, but there's no driver to do it. So this moment, when you think about where the real success will be in this application of technology, are not operators who can buy them the fastest and deploy them the most rapidly. It's about who can get them and maintain them properly. If you maintain this equipment, this type of technology that never sleeps, never needs to reset, you can unlock a lot of value. But if you do not maintain them, this is what's going to happen to shippers or brokers or motor carriers. If you're running this thing a lot more and you're not maintaining it, those sensors may fail. That technology will fall apart. And then you have a catastrophic situation that lawyers like me would be, oh my goodness, look at all that money you have. Maybe I should have some of that money. So maintenance is what it's all about.
You guys are ambulance chasers. We know how you work, Matt. Like we don't need to be reminded about how much money you make on really bad, poorly maintained equipment. Dad, it's interesting. I'd love to get your take. Is this a maintenance? Are we gonna live and die literally by maintenance with autonomous trucks?
I think maintenance is definitely important, but the one thing that has really been happening over the last 5 or 6 years to get to the autonomous truck, there's been a lot more sensors being added that basically will tell you when you need maintenance done to that truck. We're working on smart trailer technology, which almost has to go with the autonomous truck. so it can tell the truck it's got a problem. You don't want a truck pulling a trailer down the highway while all 8 tires on it burning to the ground.
But I got the chance, I was at Samsara's event this week, and I got this chance to see, we're talking about connected vehicles, the technology, the hardware that's going into it. It was absolutely insane. All of the things that they're doing and implementing a lot of these sensor technologies.
Yeah, and I think that type of technology is growing relatively fast. I think it's going to change the equation for truckers in general. I think the leasing companies have to adopt like smart trailers in order to really be a player in the autonomous truck business. So I think maintenance will be lessened as it's important, but I think it'll be lessened as a problem as we go forward.
Well, it looks like there's going to be a lot of mechanic jobs out there, but what happens to the drivers, Matt?
Yeah, so this is the reality, is that when you talk about like industries that need more people, truck driving is one of them, but it is heavy duty mechanics, repair and servicing technicians. We just do not have enough. There are so many opportunities, thousands and thousands of jobs, and these are good jobs. You can make a very good living as a mechanic for a dealer or an independent or for a fleet for that matter. And we need more technicians in this space. So for drivers that are like, I want to keep driving, hey, drayage is probably going to continue to be humans for a while. LTL certainly, food delivery, fuel certainly. It's the over-the-road trucking stuff. Long term, we see the big changes. But until the regulations come in place, it's really wishful thinking. But the technology, as far as I can tell, it is ready for commercialization. It is just waiting on the feds to step in with a framework.
By the way, if you want to send your hate messages, it's at Armchair Attorney at Lomax. Don't send them to me. I'm just here delivering the news.
That's right.
I get
That's
plenty of
right.
hate. And Max Fuller, not Craig Fuller, just for those that have an opinion. All right, well, that ends it with this another week of FreightWaves Today. Next week, Monday, please join us. We will be joined by Steve Lockington, the president and CEO of Geotab, Vitality, Barak Sindek, the managing director of Autotech Ventures. We're going to hear a lot about the venture world. And Michael D. Farkas, the president and CEO of Next NRG, and Gabe Ribeiro, head of partnerships and marketing at Hey Bubba. Man, I got a lot to ask those guys. They're going to give us perspective on technology. We have connected vehicles, we have venture, and we've got Hey Bubba is all about driver sourcing of capacity. So much to do every single day at noon to 2. Join us.